Hello everyone and welcome back to the Great Book of Grudges. My name is Nathan and today I want to talk about some DLC. You see, there's been a lot of DLC for the Total War Warhammer series, and said DLC has evolved over the years from a basic Lord pack which basically just had Legendary Lord units versus Legendary Lord and units to fully fleshed out mechanics to make that faction really unique, and also in some cases complete reworks to update certain races to bring them more in line with the current game system. So Game 1 to Game 2, which was quite radical in change, and Game 2 to Game 3, or Game 1 to Game 3 as we've already had that with the Warriors of Chaos. And a little bit of an issue that I have is a bunch of factions actually get ignored. This is either the fact that they end up in a matchup which has kind of caused issues, like say for example Skaven versus anyone else, where Skaven get the most attention, though thankfully at the end of Total War Warhammer 2 that seems to be a thing of the past. We still haven't gotten a proper Lord pack in Warhammer 3 just yet, so don't hold your breath. But the biggest problem is kind of linked to how the game works. You see, there's loads of different races and factions, and we're expecting more as time progresses, which is a good thing. Don't get me wrong, this is a very good thing. However, some races have been falling behind. We've gotten loads of DLC, loads of improvements, but there's just a very noticeable thing here. So, say for example, Warhammer 1 base game races, some of them have gotten a decent amount of DLC, but they haven't really gotten that much. The Empire and Greenskins got a decent amount of attention, mostly the Greenskins. I feel like the Greenskins are in a very good place because their rework was absolutely fantastic, and the Empire did get some DLC in Warhammer 2, but kind of fell behind. It's very obvious when you try to play them nowadays that they're kind of struggling a little bit. Hell, the AI is struggling a lot versus, say, for example, Festus, Dryker, and, well, pretty much anything in the Empire. The Dwarfs and the Vampires, however, largely ignored, which is a bit of a shame, because the Dwarfs have, what, 2 reworks now, and it still doesn't feel like it's enough. The Vampires had 1, which was okay, but still wasn't anything wow-worthy. No DLC for both of them, barring Warhammer 1, and it's kind of obvious, because yeah, it's just, they're fallen behind really badly. They're still fun factions to play. Well, the Vampire Counts at least. The Dwarfs are a little bit, boring. You can still easily have a campaign with them, even though, well, yeah, you know, they're boring, so people don't want to play them as much. They need a little bit more flavor, some unique mechanics, just to give them a little bit of an oomph. Now, the great thing is that we've seen these wonderful reworks come into effect in Game 2, like I said, not just for the Greenskins, but also the Wood Elves, the Beastmen. Those were fantastic. The Beastmen rework actually made one of the races that I detest, not just from Total War, but I just absolutely hated them on the tabletop, so I kind of refused to play them. But now they're really fun, and they're one of my dumbed down races. You know, when I just want to have a chill campaign, I'll play a Beastmen campaign, which is pretty interesting. But this issue is now extending to Warhammer 2, as we've moved on to Warhammer 3, and those factions introduced in Game 3 are just really, really cool. Yeah, they need some stuff here and there, but it's mostly just based on units and lords and stuff. Whereas, if we look to Warhammer 2, first up we can say the Skaven don't need a rework. The Skaven are perfectly fine. More than fine, I'd say. All they need really is just, you know, another Legendary Lord, Vanquil, and some units here and there, and they're pretty much done. Same thing with the Tomb Kings and the Vampire Coast. I think that both of them are perfectly fine in terms of mechanics and playstyle. All they really need now is just extra goodies. And yeah, this is a great thing because that means it can be pretty chill and they can focus on other stuff. The High Elves, yeah, need a little bit of a quality of life update just to make them a little bit more interesting. Nothing too big, I wouldn't call it a flat out rework, as generally they've gotten a lot of content. It gets a little bit progressively worse as we start going down this list, however. The Dark Elves, same thing, to be honest. They've been getting a lot of decent content, a lot of fun DLC lords. I mean, come on, Malice is cool, Hellebron is very cool too. And in general, all I would say is they just need a little bit of a spruce up, fix up, you know, the slavery system. That was just a bit weird. That, it works, but it's boring, right? The Lizardmen are a race that have actually gotten a decent amount of content over the years. It's actually quite impressive, as they have so many different legendary lords. The only problem is that the Lizardmen have been starting to show their age. And this isn't really a new issue, this is actually a Warhammer 2 issue. Yes, a Warhammer 2 base game race was entirely needing a rework, a complete rework, I'd say, since Warhammer 2. The more that other races started getting attention, the more that the Lizardmen fell behind to, well, pretty much the standards of the Dwarfs and the Vampire Counts, which is kind of concerning, because they're a fun race, it's just, yeah, dead, boring. In fact, I'd even go as far to say that out of all the base game races, the Lizardmen probably need the rework the most, because it is extremely noticeable. Obviously the one that deserves it the most is Norska, but we're not going to talk too much about them, as we know a rework is going to come eventually. It's hopefully soon. I really hope it's soon after the Chaos Dwarfs, because I want to see what they can do with Norska, considering the standard that's been set with the Champions of Chaos. It's something that is really needed. I know Norska's not the most popular faction, but with a good rework, they could be playable. So already you can see a number of things with Warhammer 1 and Warhammer 2 that some factions just didn't get a lot of DLC, some are in desperate need of reworks, and I feel like this is going to get piled on as we start moving on to the focus on Warhammer 3, which is where we are right now. As, yeah, there's a few things to talk about. Cafe and Kislev are in desperate need of content. Not so much reworks, I'd say, because I feel like Cafe is perfectly fine. Kislev's mechanics are a little bit annoying to me, but I understand why they did it. I do think that they'll need a little bit of a minor rework here and there, but they desperately need some form of content. Cafe, I still think, is better than Kislev in terms of army power and so on, but Kislev, you can kind of notice that they're a little bit rough around the edges, and they do suffer for it. A perfect example would always be just watching the AI basically get wiped out. Yes, they can hold out sometimes, but in most cases, yeah, they're not going to do so well. The Ogres are an interesting one because they are very clearly lacking units. Some stuff could be fixed with their mechanics and so on, just to make sure that everything works properly. And not even that, but just make them a little bit easier to use. The camp system, for example, if the camps could just move, would be freaking great. Or, you know, just be able to have another way to get more camps. Like, yes, you have that now, but it needs to be a little bit better refined, I'd say. Now, obviously, this a few weeks ago would have caused an uproar because, you know, DLC for a DLC race of the same game, but we know that that's not entirely needed now, because if a DLC for the Ogres come out, you can just buy that and not have to buy the base game Ogres, which I think is quite important because that opens up to a lot of possibilities. Though I must admit that it does worry me that if other races and factions get introduced, this is going to be a common thing. I don't know. And the monogods themselves are perfectly fine. It's actually thanks to Champions of Chaos having those units leak over into those factions just really does flesh them out, makes them quite good. The mechanics overall, from a gameplay point of view, has been very, very good. Kogath desperately needs a bit of a fix, though. I will say that Nurgle is in a very weird position where you're kind of just focused onto just getting Nurglings, and more Nurglings, and I don't think that brings in good gameplay. I think it's actually kind of boring. But don't get me wrong, they don't need like a dedicated rework or something, because I think it's the most unique faction that we've had so far, and it's really, really cool. Just a few value changes here and there. Hell, I've been mixing around with a little bit of modding myself, and yeah, feel like just a few changes to the economy would just make the faction a lot more enjoyable. But as you can see here, there's definitely factions that have fallen behind from Game 1 all the way up to Game 3, which is something that will get fixed out with DLC, and obviously reworks attached to it. But the reason why I made this video is to point it out, mostly because I don't know how much content Warhammer 3 is going to get. We've potentially getting free DLCs this year, which could potentially fix a lot of problems, but we don't know if we're actually going to get free DLCs this year. This is the problem. And, you know, it's the whole case of how the roadmap has been delayed 3 times. DLC plans could change, a lot of plans could change in the future, and some races by the end of the series could end up being totally ignored and possibly dependent on mods just to give them a quality of life update. I imagine that we'll get around 5 years of support in terms of DLC and stuff, and even updates, or at least here's hoping. The problem is there needs to be a focus on fixing up the problems, but also focusing on bringing out new and exciting content. It's not just Lord packs, but also race packs potentially in the future, and loads of stuff. One thing that could be done is if we're getting to the point that the base game of Immortal Empires is good enough that, you know, DLC can be focused on now, and I'm really hoping that Creative Assembly sees it that way, then reworks could be actually done in patches, just patches that don't have DLCs. I think that's going to be something that could be really useful just to fix up stuff that might not need content now, but desperately needs a bit of a fix-up. Kind of like what happened to Norska recently, but not just a small update, I mean a fully fledged rework, where a patch comes out if there's a DLC lull, and they can just fix up a certain race. Kogath and Nurgle, for example, would be a great way to do so. Just fix that up, and eventually we will get DLC. It's almost certain at this point. But, you know, fix the problems now before we have to wait for a content. I don't like the fact that sometimes we have to wait for DLC content just to see a race fixed up. And I don't mean in the same quality as, say, for example, the Vampire Counts or the Dwarfs twice. We need proper, fully fleshed out reworks. And it should be possible, considering that they did say that they have multiple teams working on DLC. If this is still true, then every now and then when a patch jumps out, they can fix some stuff up. It doesn't even have to be for full races, it could just be for some of the factions. Skrork is the perfect example, again, because he's a major clan and yet has no fun mechanics. He's got access to, like, plagues and stuff, but it's the Warhammer 2 version. Just give him the Warhammer 3 version, switch some names around, change the background art to just something Clan Pestilence style. There we go. We just fix up the faction, and the idea is, yeah, that's enough. You know, like the Skaven don't need anything else. Well, barring units and stuff, but you know what I mean, right? This could be done for a lot of Legendary Lords just to give them a little bit more of a flesh out. Ark the Black is another one that could use a little bit more of a flesh out tone, you know? I don't know. Let me know what you guys think about this. Maybe I'm just going insane at this point, but I'd love to see more dedicated patches coming out just to fix some stuff up, just to spruce up some characters, spruce up some races, and fix a lot of issues that desperately need to be fixed. By the time that this series ends, I would love to see it in this really massive state where even years post no content, you'll still be coming back to it and playing it, and this is something that I really want myself. We never know when that's going to happen, but you know what I mean. Yeah, let me know what you guys think in the comments below. Let's start a bit of a discussion, and yeah, I'm kind of curious to see what you guys think. Do you want some dedicated patches that aren't attached to DLC in any way, shape, or form, or is there a better way to go about this?